Good evening, hello and welcome to Brass Tacks. I'm Anusha Soni. The blot of colonialism has been removed, said the Prime Minister as he made a pitch for a renewed and re-energized New India. The Prime Minister inaugurated the Kartavya Path, earlier known as Rajpath, and the statue of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose at India Gate. In his address, the Prime Minister also reminded us how the previous governments have failed to give Netaji his due. But the address of the Prime Minister was not just about politics, but he also reminded us about the Panch Pran, one of which is to understand and celebrate our history and culture, our own identity, without the burden of colonialism. This renewed push demands that each individual, each citizen, reimagines herself, her identity as a Bharatiya. And this reimagination of the identity is what defines brand Modi and distinguishes his government. Tonight we discuss on polity, identity and the barbs coming in from the opposition.
गुलामी का प्रतीक किंग्स वे यानी राजपथ आज से इतिहास की बात हो गया। भारत सुभाष बाबू की राह पर चला होता तो आज देश कितनी ऊंचाइयों पर हो। देश की नीतियों और निर्णयों में सुभाष बाबू की छाप रहे, ये प्रतिमा इसके लिए प्रेरणा स्रोत बनेगी।
And in his address from the brand new Kartavya Path, the Prime Minister also said that India has removed the blot of colonialism today and given a true patriot his due. Listen in, and then we have our guests with us on the broadcast.
गुजरे हुए कल को छोड़कर आने वाले कल की तस्वीर में नए रंग भर रहे हैं। गुलामी का प्रतीक किंग्स वे यानी राजपथ आज से इतिहास की बात हो गया है, हमेशा के लिए मिट गया है। आज कर्तव्य पथ के रूप में नए इतिहास का सृजन हुआ है। मैं सभी देशवासियों को आजादी के इस अमृत काल में गुलामी की एक और पहचान से मुक्ति के लिए बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। नेताजी की मूर्ति की स्थापना करके आधुनिक और सशक्त भारत की प्राण प्रतिष्ठा भी कर दी है। वाकई ये अवसर ऐतिहासिक है, ये अवसर अभूतपूर्व है। हम सभी का सौभाग्य है कि हम आज का ये दिन देख रहे हैं, इसके साक्षी बन रहे हैं। साथियों, सुभाष चंद्र बोस ऐसे महामानव थे जो पद और संसाधनों की चुनौती से परे थे। उनकी स्वीकार्यता ऐसी थी कि पूरा विश्व उन्हें नेता मानता था, लेकिन दुर्भाग्य से आजादी के बाद हमारे इस महान नायक को भुला दिया गया।
Was Netaji given his due? Once again, this question has been raised by the Prime Minister, and he says he was never given the due that he should have. Joining us on the broadcast is a panel of guests. We have Mohan Kumar Mangalam, who's the spokesperson of the Congress Party, Mr. Nalin Kohli, who's the national spokesperson of the BJP. He is also joining us on the broadcast. We have Arun Anand, who's the consulting editor of the First Post, Chandrachud Ghosh, who's a historian, and we also have Anuj Dhar, who's the author of Subhash Bose Life After Death, the much celebrated book. I want to begin with you, Anuji, and beyond the politics of this entire issue, what the Congress says and what the BJP says, this is a generation, unfortunately, that has learnt its history through WhatsApp and is often not informed about historical facets, and that is why the arguments often become political. But you, as a subject matter expert on Subhash Chandra Bose, his life, the controversies around it, what is your opinion? Was he given his due, and if not, what are the historical examples that tell us about it?
Historical examples would speak for them themselves.
Yeah.
So we have, for a start, 1947, when India transfer of power becomes free, there's a demand that we should have Netaji's statue, Netaji's portrait in the assembly, which became our parliament.
Yeah.
Turned down. It was only in 1978, because of the efforts put in by Samar Guha and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and then Prime Minister Morarji Bhai Desai, that we had Netaji's portrait in Parliament House. So can you imagine, beginning 47, for 25 years, this country had to wait for Netaji to find a place in the Parliament House. And I would say that compared to Netaji, there were other Tom, Dick and Harrys who were given that space. So they were, stalwarts as far as we are concerned, but when you put them in next to Subhash Bose, they were nobodies. So this was the condition, and then today I've noticed, there's some misleading statements have been made, even by journalists, that the name of Rajpath, the Kingsway, was changed after independence. What do you mean by independence? It was not changed until 1955. It was Kingsway, named after King George V.
The King George.
So it was only in 1955, when we were about to receive a Russian gift, Russian Nikita Khrushchev, only then it was changed. And nobody in India, you're talking about young generational change. Imagine the plight of young people growing up in India in 1950s and 60s. They would, come to the same Rajpath and they would see the statue of King George V. His Majesty is still there. Nobody wanted to be removed. It was only like in 65, Subhash Bose's followers went and they defaced the statue and they smeared some tar on the face of the statue, and then of course they put Subhash Bose's portrait there. It is only then, and of course there was a controversy in England, London, they were not very happy. It's only then this decision was taken to remove the statue. So this is exactly what happened. They were not bothered, they were not concerned, and in between
when you say they, you mean the Congress Party,
the government in power, of course,
the
have
government
to blame
in
them.
power,
There's no
the
other
Congress
way
Party
out, of course.
yes.
And then imagine, you go back to 1955. So people of India would find it shocking today, but 1955, the chief of the Indian Air Force was a British, Angrez. I'm not talking about Anglo-Indians. I'm talking about proper British citizen. The chief of the Indian Navy in 1955 was Angrez.
Yes.
And the Intelligence Bureau of India was reporting to London till then. There is a lot of, I hope time would come, and time would come. This is not we are not living in Indira Gandhi's era. Transfer of power has to be thrashed out fairly and squarely. There is something very fishy about the transfer of power. There is something fishy about India joining the Commonwealth in 1949. Commonwealth, if I would call it in Hindi, Gulamo ka tola. So all the former slaves of the British, and of course, the Australia and New Zealand, who were essentially the Britishers, living in other colonies. So they formed a group. People of India did not want, but Panditji took that call, and unfortunately, when under the Freedom of Information Act, our RTI, a question was put to the government: let us have the records about India's joining, the Commonwealth of Nations.
Anuj,
the answer is no. They have no information, no record. Records have vanished, disappeared.
As you share all these examples, and these are pertinent examples which I'll take to our guests, I also want you to talk about, as a historian, as somebody who researches about it, that why is this history and a reminder of this history is important for this generation and the discourse for modern India? What does it tell us? How does it serve us?
It's about politics, it's more about politics than history. But I was giving example of somebody walking across that road in 1950s. The people, young generation grew up seeing the George fifth standing tall. Now the young generation, they would see Netaji and the way they think. Chandrachud Ghosh is right now in IIT Kanpur. I will be joining him tomorrow. I've just returned from a long tour of America where I've been, of course. We go all over the world, and is essentially in young people, youth. In this age, where media has become so powerful, so formidable, and so much different from what it used to be even 10 years ago, and the onset of social media. Usually all over the country, the youth are very energetic, so they don't have the inhibitions that people have even 10 years ago. I believe as a matter of giving this thing is going to give a huge psychological boost, because how people were groomed and fashioned back.
And how you perceived your own identity as an Indian, the complexes you had, or you want to do away with. I think this generation should do away.
The idea was that the Indians did not have the courage, beginning 1857. We did not have the courage to look into the eyes of the British. Take, for example, old pictures. See pictures of people, you have group pictures of people sitting with Angrez. They would be afraid in the company of, the white people. So they did not have the guts to look in the eye. Forget about taking arms and fight with them. And look at what this man did. 6 months of training, Subhash Bose, INA. He made women, back in those days in 1940-43, even the film actresses would not look straight into the camera, lest people should feel offended. He made women stick up arms and fight. So this is what this man achieved.
This is what that ideology.
6 months.
I will open this debate to now the political guests we have, Nalin Kohli and Mohan Kumar Mangalam. Mohanji, first coming to you, why did it take us more than 2 decades to have a portrait of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in the parliament?
No, I'm not aware of the reasons why it took as long as it did, but I'll say that, on a day that Congress has actually started its Rajpath, I'm not surprised that Mr. Modi has chosen to make another announcement, rename another path to Kartavya Path, and unveil a statue. I welcome any statue of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. He was the first to call of the father of our nation, give him that title, and fondly called him Bapu. They had a great dynamic between the two of them. We have so many great freedom fighters in our country, and maybe there is one particular freedom fighter here who we all admire, whose unveiling of portrait had been delayed. But to look into the past and assign sort of nefarious reasons for it is not something that is going to be.
Mohanji, I'm not assigning nefarious reasons. No, that's not the intent. That's not the intent. But can I tell you something very honestly?
Honestly, hold on a second.
Yeah.
You are in the way that the question. No. By asking this question, you assume that there is some sort of design or some sort of.
The way I framed my question is Mohan, this is unfair. This is unfair. This is unfair.
How is this unfair?
The way I framed my question is, why did it take so long? I did not attribute a motive to you. Then don't turn my question as nefarious. That's unfair.
And I am saying that I am not saying your question is nefarious. I'm saying there is an underlying assumption when you ask me that question that there is a purposeful ignoring of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, which is what I'm actually rebuking here, and which is why I'm telling you that we are a country of many great freedom fighters.
I'm going to interject you once again. I'm going to interject you once again, Mohan. I'm not going to talk about the yatra that the Congress party has started. Very good you've started that yatra. Inflation, price rise, there are various other issues that the opposition parties should raise. Good that the Congress party is hitting the streets. I'm not talking about that. But BJP often, your political opponents often, and now we have historians also who are talking about it, that the Congress party has shied away and ducked away some very uncomfortable questions of past and history. And this is a case in point. When I asked you a very simple question, you spoke about the politics of the Congress, you spoke about the motives or the underlying assumption of the question, but you did not answer me on the substance of the question. Would you? Mohanji.
On the substance of the question, I'm trying to tell you that many great freedom fighters' portraits were unveiled, and if the unveiling of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's portrait was delayed, it wasn't for any nefarious reason. That is my answer to you. If you're going to ask me if there's any specific reason, there is an assumption in that question that there was a design as to why it's delayed. And I am actually saying that isn't the case. I'm also saying that it is afraid to have statues of our freedom fighters. But what we want to do is focus on the problems of today. And if you want to build a young, confident India, as some of your other guests talked about, being able to look into the eyes of the world, then we need to focus on the problems of the day, and we need to figure out how we are going to build a prosperous nation so that all of us can be proud of and look anybody in the eye we want to.
Well, I agree with you that we need to focus on the problems of today, but the way we all imagine our identity as Indians, the history that we come from, I think an acknowledgement of that is also very, very critical. Mr. Chandrachud Ghosh, I'm going to bring you into the discussion. Mohanji is arguing that, all right, the portrait was not there in Parliament, and more than 2 decades it was not there, but don't assign a nefarious reason for it. I mean, there wasn't a nefarious reason. Do you accept that argument?
I would have agreed with him. I would have agreed with him if it was an isolated example. Let me also add the question: why did it take so long to rename the Andaman Islands? The demand has been there from the very beginning, as soon as the Legislative Assembly was formed in independent India. That was not done. I will give you some more examples, perhaps, which are not so commonly known.
Yeah.
That when the All India radio station in Calcutta wanted to celebrate Netaji's birthday in 1948 and 49. Sardar Patel, who was the Information and Broadcasting Minister at that time, he tried to stop it. And in 1948, there was a strike by the protest by the station workers. In 49, the artists led a protest. They put their foot down and said that if this does not happen, we are not performing. And you will be surprised to know the name of the person who led that protest for the artists. It was the biggest superstar of the day, Kalandari.
Yeah.
So, I can go on citing examples. There is nothing about nefarious intent here. It is a very well calculated intent of sidelining Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, because firstly, he was thrown out of the Congress in 1939. His elder brother, Sarad Bose, was thrown out of the Congress the very next year. And this went on, and he was never taken back. He was asked to apologize for his political stance. He's going over to the Axis to fight for India's interests, was attacked all around. He was, several motives were ascribed, and there has been a very well calculated to prop up one non-violent Gandhian philosophy, and which later on was taken up by the Nehruvian politics, philosophy, and governance model, or whatever you call it. That particular strand had to be propped up, had to be championed, and for that purpose, it was essential to brush Netaji's role, contribution, his philosophy, his caliber under the carpet, at least to downsize it.
Mohanji, you want to come into the discussion? We'll try and connect with Mohan Kumar Mangalam. I think there's a problem with that line. But I want to bring in Mr. Arun Anand, the consulting editor of First Post, who's with us on the broadcast. Sir, the way Prime Minister spoke today, and not the first time, he's spoken in this tone and tenor multiple times, is his call to reimagine our own identity, especially, I think, for the younger generation, without the chains of colonialism, realizing and acknowledging what went wrong, and then moving forward and creating a new identity. And perhaps this pitch is what makes brand Modi so different and this government so different. That you're not just talking about your present schemes, what you want to do for the welfare of the country, but there's also a pitch to understand, celebrate, and reclaim your own past.
See, what Mr. Narendra Modi is right now, but he has said that we need to, decolonize, and my fellow panelists, they have also, spoken about how the legacy of Subhash Chandra Bose, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was ignored. See, largely, it's a larger question. What Narendra Modi has done is that he has understood that our whole independence movement was not merely a political fight to throw out the British. It was basically a search for selfhood. वो एक स्व की खोज थी. That was the larger message of that independence movement. That was the core of the independence movement. And people like Subhash Chandra Bose, they represented really that quest for selfhood. Not, the subsequent Congress leaders who they were not representing that quest for selfhood. So that's why for the next 7 decades when we became independent.
Yeah.
So after that, the whole independence movement has been projected as that it was merely a political fight to throw out the British. No, it was largely a cultural fight.
Yeah.
It was a quest for the selfhood, and that is what when Prime Minister says that we need to decolonize. So that is basically extension of that message that when you're celebrating 75th year of your independence, so then you need to renew your quest for that selfhood, and you need to realize that selfhood. So it was not merely, that's why we have got political independence, but largely we still remain culturally very, very colonized.
Yeah.
I just want to add a small nugget of information so that when Mr. Kumar Mangalam comes to line, he can probably answer that. In 1955, around 1955, a member of parliament, Dr. Raghuveer, had asked for changing the names of a number of roads in Delhi, which Nehru rejected, and then the Chief Commissioner of Delhi wrote a letter to him, and then he suggested that okay, these names should be changed, and Nehru writes a letter, and this letter is there in the Nehru Memorial. You can search it online also.
Yeah.
So then Nehru writes a letter to the Home Secretary saying that I know it is basically the Chief Commissioner is writing on the behest of Dr. Raghuveer, who was a member of Parliament, who was a nationalist.
Yeah.
So, and he only goes on to change 5 names of only the 5 roads.
Okay.
And the rest of the, a lot of colonial legacy remains there. So this is how they have, dealt with the whole situation.
Okay.
So, and I think Congress should accept that, okay, they committed a mistake. I think simply they can say, we should have done that. We have committed a mistake. We are sorry. And I think they should congratulate the Prime Minister and
it sounds very utopian to me, Arunji, but thank you for sharing those anecdotes. Mr. Nalal Kohli, I'm going to come to you and bring you into the discussion. We don't have the Congress party with us on the broadcast, and in the spirit of fairness, it's only right that I ask you the questions that Mohanji was also raising earlier. That what would you really achieve by renaming roads? What would you really achieve by creating statues? Because in reality, you haven't really honored the ideals. The other argument of the Congress party and your political opponents is that you're not ready to face the issues of price rise head-on or inflation or unemployment head-on. And that is why you create these gimmicks. Please respond to them.
The Congress party is entitled to say anything they want. And that's really of little consequence because it doesn't come from conviction. It possibly comes from dismay because the model that the Congress party has professed in the 55 odd years that they were in government is based on the politics of entitlement, where family matters, no one else. So the centrality of their own political structure, which is the party, and the centrality of their governance model has been family-centric. Now, that's their model. That model, in stark contrast, is the model since 2014, which is a people-centric government, which is what Narendra Modi ji has brought. So he first says, I'm the Pradhan Sevak, I'm not the Prime Minister. I'm one of you to serve you. The second is, if you look at the journey, it's about ensuring benefits reach those who need it most. So it's about not poverty alleviation, it's about poverty eradication of a new India that will be a $5 trillion economy one day. And we are moving in that direction. And an India that is self-confident in itself, about itself. It's not an India that is living in a legacy and shadow of a colonial past, feeling lack of confidence. This is a confident India, where Indians will march with their heads held high. Now, when we come to the naming of a road, it's not a road that's being named. It's much more. The focus changes from Rajpath, which is from ruling, to Kartavya, which is duty. Look at the location of the road. On both sides of the road, essentially, the government, which goes right up to North Block, South Block, Parliament House, North Block, South Block, and then the presidential estate, or Rashtrapati Bhavan. And at the other end, you've got now Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, a freedom fighter of eminence, someone we've actually done great disservice to in our 70 years, 75 years, of not even recognizing them, how late it was to start bringing them central. And today, in a sense, you put an icon of the freedom movement. Gandhiji, obviously, as the father of the nation, enjoys that. Sardar Patel has come through what the Statue of Unity is. Now, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. It's not centric to one person. It's recognition of each one who contributed in India. But coming back, Kartavya Path is essentially service, duty towards the nation, starting from the government first. So, therefore, this is a historic, important day. The Congress party may want to demean it. That's their politics.
I don't think we're getting Mr. Mohan Kumar Mangalam back into the debate. So I'll go back to Anuj Thar and I'll discuss a few more points with him, and then I'll bring in all of you into the discussion. Anuj, you spoke about the fact that how there has been overlooking of certain ideals, and before the show began, you spoke about the facet of transfer of power. There's an interesting aspect that Mr. Chandrachud Ghosh also brings into the discussion, which is about imagining our independence struggle as some kind of a singular movement which had one way, one structure of non-violence. Not to run down the contribution of the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, but the way our freedom fighters, including Subhash Chandra Bose, imagined India and the way they fought were very, very different from the means that Mahatma Gandhi adopted.
I'm a former journalist. I'm a journalist. I tell you the facts. I just report. It so happens about history. Well, one of the big difference between Netaji and Mahatma Gandhi was that Mahatma Gandhi was stuck on dominion status. Is to be like Canada is a dominion of Great Britain. New Zealand is a dominion. And that's why Gandhiji wanted a Union Jack on Free India's flag. So the goals of both Subhash Bose and Gandhiji were not same. Gandhiji was for dominion status, and Subhash Bose wanted Puran Swaraj. Like America, you will be totally cut off from the British, because on one hand, if you're saying the British came to India, they did all sort of things to us. So obviously, we will have no. For Canada to have that link, it makes sense because they are descendants of the Britishers. So this was one big problem, and eventually, like Panditji and Subhash were on the same side. They virtually forced Gandhiji in 29 when this Congress had this, in Lahore, very famous meeting. But Gandhiji again, after 5 months, again he came back to the same. So when it came to the crunch, even Panditji changed side, and suddenly we have the transfer of power, and we become a dominion. So India was not a free country. Nalinji would know, he was such an eminent lawyer, he would know. India was not a free country. The King of England, George VI, was our head of the state, even after 47. Most people do not know this. The head of the state of India after 47 till 48 was the King of England, even beyond.
Till the constitution actually came into being.
Yeah, but then it doesn't gel well with a lot of things which are being said, that we drove them away and so on and so forth. No, you did not drive anybody away. Union Jack did not come down on 1947. Mountbatten has left a lot of details about it. And then has been for many, many decades. Now, I grew up in New Delhi. Like, you have this, conspiracy theories about there being, secret, clauses to the transfer of power. And one of the clauses was about Subhash Bose, that, this fellow has been involved in war crimes here and there. So once he, resurfaces in India, he should be handed over and tried. So this was in the domain of conspiracy theorists. Now, a great change has come about. Like recently, like a couple of years ago, the British government, the British intelligence, so they declassified, their, so this is open, out in the open. This is no longer this is as clear as the daylight. So they have the MI5 has made it known as part of the transfer power. They were secret deals. So now the deals were there. It is confirmed. So there was an unwritten secret clause. The MI5 opened a secret office in Delhi, which was given the nomenclature of SLO, Security Liaison Office. Nobody told me about it. In my parliament, now we are the country, we are the people who keep going all over the world talking about the need for the world peace and to talk about truth, etc. But nobody told me ever in history, in parliament, Panditji, nobody, that we had a secret office of the Security Liaison Office in Delhi. It functioned till 1968. It was wound up not because India wanted, because the British government ran out of money. And our intelligence bureau was reporting to London via SLO. Our directors, beginning with Mr. Malik, Mr. Huja, all of them were the chamchas of the British who were going and reporting to the British even after independence. Not only that, these are matter of record. That's why I'm being very frank with you on national television. The records clearly show they were not only spying and snooping on Subhash Bose's family, they were passing on dutifully I believe BJP has been very soft on Congress party. They were passing on information to British intelligence after independence.
I want to bring in Arun Anandji also into the discussion. Arunji, a lot of facets of our history have never been taught to us. In fact, they were never been told on the floor of the House and Parliament as well. And now these uncomfortable historical facts are being discussed in the public domain, rightly so. In the polity of today, in real politique, when these historical wounds are being opened, we're talking about them, we are addressing these issues, how is it likely to affect today's politics? And more importantly, vis-a-vis the Congress party, brand Narendra Modi, and the elections ahead in 2024?
I think it's going to have a great impact on today's polity, and it's already having an impact on today's polity. Congress has a lot to answer as a political party which ruled this country for more than 5 decades, and it ensured that only a unidimensional kind of a history that is being taught to the students. And the problem was that at that time there was no internet. So, and the mass media tools were also very much limited. So whichever the ruling party was, so it was able to push its propaganda through these platforms. So now, when we have internet, when you have archives which are available online, when people can talk about it on social media, so people are asking questions. Anybody who talks, who tracks social media, so they can see that people are asking tough questions, and Congress doesn't have answers to these questions. So, and Congress actually doesn't know its own history, because in 1950, but I'll just give you a small example that how Congress has basically shot itself in the foot, and how it is impacting, how it has started. Actually, this whole thing had started impacting the Indian politics since 1950. Nehru, subsequently Indira, so both of them were such shrewd politicians that they ensured that Congress remained in power without answering these questions. Like in 1950, Nehru wanted his own candidate to win the Congress president election, and Purushottam Das Tandon defeated J.B. Kripalani massively, who was Nehru's candidate. And what was the bone of contention? The bone of contention.
Arunji, I'm sorry.
I'll just finish it. The bone of contention was that Nehru did not want Purushottam Das Tandon to speak on the plight of Hindus which they had suffered during the partition. So this is how the things have been going on within Congress.
Arunji, this is the facet I want to talk to you about. That, the moment you mention certain uncomfortable facts about history and the manner in which the country was run largely by the Congress party, which was in power after independence, the argument that comes in is that there is an attempt to demonize the icons of the Congress party. There's an attempt to take over history. There's an attempt to rewrite the history which is factually incorrect. And somewhere, I think the opposition, of course, because these are uncomfortable questions for them, is not ready to face these questions head on. It's called the demonization project without really getting into the merits of the debate.
I think you have raised a very pertinent point. And see, the problem is that the left and the Congress, they colluded throughout 1950s, 60s. If you look at the names of the HRD ministers, which were posted right from the beginning, and the way JNU was set up. So this whole story has been told many times, but I'm just recalling it. So if you look at the education ministers or the human resource development ministers, throughout we had people who were, even within Congress, when they were within Congress, they were left of the center. So it was a joint project which was going on. And now the problem is, as I mentioned, that Congress doesn't know its own history. Like I'll just add in 30 seconds, I'll just add another nugget. Rahul Gandhi started Bharat Jodo Yatra from Kanyakumari, and the gentleman did not visit Vivekanand Smarak there, which his grandmother Indira Gandhi had visited, which is the biggest symbol of Bharat Jodo. And it was set up by basically, an RSS Pracharak. And Indira Gandhi visited there, and Indira Gandhi had written in the visitors book all praise, and one of the greatest connecting symbols for India. And this is how, they deal with their history.
Chandrachud Ghosh, I'm coming to you. And we're talking about these uncomfortable facets of history which we've never been taught, which we've not spoken about. Anuj pointed out to some glaring things that happened during the transfer of power. Limited amount of evidence, of course, has come in the public domain. But this evidence indicates a lot of things which have not been revealed so far. But talking about the manner in which history has been framed or the legacy of a leader like Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose has been celebrated, and he's not the only figure which many would argue has been ignored. There are many other freedom fighters, in fact the prime ministers that we have had in this country, apart from Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Indira Gandhi, who many would argue have not been celebrated enough. To correct that history and understanding of history and not get into demonization, what is the way forward? What is your understanding as a historian?
See, the first thing is that everything should be brought out in the public domain. And that is where, and nobody wants to demonize any particular leader or any political party just without reason. And if the process of transparency, when it begins, if it puts particular leaders or particular parties in a particular light, then one can't help it. The question, therefore, is, I would add another question. Why did it have to be a non-Congress government in 1998 to declassify the INA files, the files related to the Indian National Army? So the INA was wrapped up in 1945, and the files related to them were declassified by the National Front government in 1998. What prevented the Congress party to put them in the National Archives out to the scholars? When Anuj and we started the transparency campaign related to Netaji and Lal Bahadur Shastri as well. But our focus has been on Netaji. And whenever we asked for information, the stock answer from the Congress government, the UP government at that time, was that if we release documents on Netaji, it will harm our relations with foreign governments and create internal disturbance. So, why was
Chandrachud, what according to you can the government do more when it comes to legacy of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose? Because I want to take that question to Nalin Kohli as well.
Yeah, I was both Anuj and I were talking to Anand about it, and we said that the Mission Netaji campaign that we run, both of us, half of our dream has been achieved today. And we are grateful to Prime Minister Modi for that. And now the other half remains, where the burning question is there has to be a closure on the question of his fate. And whatever has been told, just like fairy tale has been passed off in the name of history by the previous Congress governments for so many decades, for the 7.5 decades, the fairy tale that Netaji died in 1945 in a plane crash is also fairy tale. And the stalwart ministers in the current government also argued in favor of that. There was no death. Netaji did not die. So the question is, that has to be settled. That question, the truth has to be told. We have, through our research, put forth all the evidence that points conclusively that he did not die. Now, there has to be a government stand on it. The government cannot evade or close its eyes. It has to close that issue, bring out the truth, how much ever uncomfortable it is, even if there is apprehension that it will create some sort of disturbance among people. I believe people of our country are mature enough, and with the flow of information, we live in the information age. We don't live in the 50s and 60s anymore, that there will be riots and people will
people can handle uncomfortable information. Nalin Kohli, there are many things, and these are two historians, these are two people who have worked for the cause of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Chandrachud Ghosh and Anuj Dhar, and both are saying that there's so much more that needs to be done, especially the controversy around the death of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. At least this government, with the mandate that it has, can really settle these uncomfortable questions that all of us want an answer of.
That's a tough one, honestly. And I'd say that, being a lawyer, also in public life, sometimes things, we look for closure, and sometimes closure is a new opening, which is anything but closure. That's why I said that's a tough one.
Nananji, I have seen you in court, in Supreme Court very often. I would not allow you the play of words. You'd have to answer that question point blank.
No,
Netaji,
I won't.
we are pinning our hopes on you. I mean, no, you have brought us the closest. Last 75 years. This is the best government for us. Modi ji is our best chance.
What is stopping this government, Nalin?
We are just hoping in praying 7 years, 8 years.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. See, in fairness, I can't answer that in fairness and in honesty because I don't know. After all, there are things, I mean, there is a system in the West in terms of declassifying, which is what you were referring to, and we are all aware. I'm a student of history, so I appreciate the inputs coming from any historian or anyone who works on subjects of history. So therefore, that's one part. The second is a larger part which involves continuing relationships with foreign countries. So that's a second part to it. And my guess is, and that I'm wearing my legal hat, not a political one. My guess is that any answer that looks at it, because here there is assumedly, of what we have read in history, correct or incorrect, is that multiple international events are linked to the last flight or the last movement or the travels of Netaji. So that could be perhaps a reason, but we have to leave it to the wisdom of the government. But what I can say about Prime Minister Modi's government is, and which is evident today, is that Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose is being recognized and finally being acknowledged as never before, and quite rightfully. And this is to be true for every son or daughter of India.
I'm short of time. Anuj, are you satisfied with that answer?
But with Nalinji, of course, because I have highest esteem, so I'm happy with Nalinji. But for the BJP, like, as I said, we have pinned our hopes on Modi ji. He can overcome these problems. I hope he's working. Maybe he's just building up everything. And talking of demonization, of course, I just heard, I mean, we are not even talking actually. What do you?
Yes,
I mean, this country had, for whatever reason, the Congress leader chose a pedophile as our first Governor General for India. So we are not trying to demonize. There's so much of dirt in this whole case. But maybe time will come when people discuss. By the way, one more thing. As we speak, Queen Elizabeth is not well. I just read on Twitter.
Yeah. We're going to go to that bit of news as well.
Yeah, because she's the granddaughter of King George VI, who's being discussed today.
Chandrachurji, you want to make a point? Quickly make your point.
I'll just come to, as a rebuttal to Nalinji's point. His argument sounded very much like the Congress, the UP of the earlier years. And when, particularly tonight, when Modi ji is talking about a resurgent India, when he is talking about a new spirit, decolonizing, forgetting our old past that can be forgotten, and Modi ji has the massive mandate inside Parliament, outside Parliament.
Okay, those are the hopes, Nalinji, that have been pinned on you.
If anybody can do, he can do it. So the BJP has to.
That's why I said it really falls onto the government, Chandrachurji. No, I think I'll answer both Anuj and Chandrachurji.
20 seconds, and I really can't answer.
That's the honest truth. And that is something that has to be left to the wisdom of the government. Take the example, let's say the McMahon line. It's an issue. So that is an issue that obviously only the government.
I'm sorry to interrupt this very intriguing discussion. I'm short of time, Nalinji. I'm sorry to interrupt you there. But as a student of history, as a student of law, and more importantly, as a citizen of this nation, I would want to know how my freedom fighters lived, how they died, what is the controversy around them, and what are the uncomfortable truths that have been hidden from us as citizens when we were studying history in our schools and in our colleges. Nalin Kohli, Arun Anand, Chandrachud Ghosh, Anuj Dhar, and Mohan Kumar Mangalam, who was briefly with us on the show. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the broadcast. It was a pleasure to speak to you all. Joining us on the show is also Ardendu Bose. He is Netaji's nephew. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to us on the show. It's a very important day today. The statue of Netaji has finally been inaugurated at none other than Kartavya Path. The renaming of Rajpath has happened. Your first thoughts and emotions on this momentous occasion?
Very, very emotional. And it was long overdue. It's been 75 years, and the statues of other stalwarts have come up in Delhi. And sadly, Netaji was, I'm sorry to say, was sidelined for for 60, 70 years. And my fondest regards to Shri Narendra Modi. Because of him, all this is happening. And I, as family, we are very, very grateful and proud. I'm proud of being Indian.
But sir, it took many years. I mean, not just the legacy of Netaji is not honored in the country. I mean, it is in many ways, but a lot of us have always felt that he never got the place that he should have, like you're also saying. With him is also the legacy of India's freedom struggle. The way he led the country has not been celebrated enough. Historians have said that. And not to forget that even today there is a lot of politics around it. How do you see the political statements coming in from different leaders? Do you think that he's finally got his due, or there's a long way to go about it?
No, that's what I said a minute ago. I think he has got his due, and we have to be happy. And I'm not really concerned about all the opposition and the sarcasm coming from Mamata Banerjee or the Congress party. It is immaterial. It doesn't matter. It's just politics. And politics will happen. It happens all over the world. I guess it'll happen here. So I don't think I am worried about it. I don't think my family is worried about it. And I don't think the party, Narendra Modi ji, and the BJP should be worried about it. It's immaterial. I mean, we just go for the occasion, and the occasion is great.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Thank you so much for your time. Well, with that, we're slipping into a very short break. But as we wrap up this debate, it's important to say that those who don't know their history, those who don't learn from their history, are doomed to repeat it. And that is why it is important to understand our legacy, our history, and our freedom struggle. On the other side, much more lined up. Stay tuned.